Next fund has been crushing U.S. markets over the past year. EMQQ, Kevin Carter is the founder and chief investment officer of the fund. The ETF right now, Kevin, is up almost to double the NASDAQ on the year, almost 10 times the S&P on the year. We're talking like almost 70% the past 52 weeks. Walk me through it.
Well, thanks for having me. You know, emerging markets are a difficult asset class, I think, for most people to invest in. People have complained that the broad indexes haven't done much for the last decade, and they haven't. But the problem with the broad indexes is they're full of the legacy economy, the commodities, the state-owned oil companies and banks. What we focus on is where the growth is, and the growth is in the consumer. McKinsey calls the growth of the emerging market consumer the biggest growth opportunity in the history of capitalism, and everybody that invests in emerging markets should focus on that. And what we've captured is the emerging market consumer meets the computer in form of a smartphone and meets the internet in form of mobile broadband. And, you know, frankly, I think it's the fastest growing sector in the world, not just today, but ever.
So walk me through the companies here that you're getting exposure to when you buy the fund. I mean, these are not like manufacturing companies and EM markets at all. This is internet, it's e-commerce. As we know, the NASDAQ has been printing higher way past the rest of the market. Why are these companies doing even better than the ones we know in the NASDAQ?
Well, first, in terms of the companies, it's Alibaba, it's Tencent, it's Mercado Libre, and 80 other, internet companies in the developing world, including China, India, Brazil, Africa, Russia, etc. And I think that, people are looking for growth. And in a world where, entire industries are going to have significant declines in revenue this year, I think that the emerging market internet companies are a bright spot, and they've been a bright spot for a long time.
So Tencent, Alibaba, we know some of these names. They're big, they've been around, they're dominant. Is this the start of a trend? Is it the meat of it? I mean, when we look at these charts, it's pretty incredible to just see how vertical it's gone. Can that type of momentum last?
Well, you're certainly right. The chart right now, is decidedly up. But I'm a long-term investor, and I pray towards Omaha. And in the short term, the stock market's a voting machine, but in the long term, it's a scale. And the thing that gets put on the scale are earnings. And the revenue growth for the sector over the last decade has averaged about 38% a year. Which again I think is the fastest growing sector in the world, and that will slow that revenue growth number, but it will still be the fastest growing sector. And how the market will look at it in short term periods, is hard to predict. But I think longer term, I think investors that have the appropriate time frame will continue to do quite well. And I think that while earnings are hard to get your arms around right now for this year, I still think that the PEG ratio, the PE versus the growth rate, is still not too far from one, and I think that compares quite favorably with the S&P 500.
These companies, big cap China stocks, is there geopolitical risk? It doesn't seem like there have been any notable volatility over the last month, despite some of the drama picking up in Hong Kong again. The companies seem totally immune to this right now. Does that make sense to you?
Well, look, we've been living with a pretty significant amount of geopolitical risk, or at least angst and concern about geopolitical risk. And by geopolitical, the geo being the United States and China. And that backdrop, that worry, I think, has persisted and will intensify from time to time. It very well may intensify around the election. But, longer term, the United States and China are intertwined economically. And I think that no matter how much saber rattling goes on, I think, we will find a way to keep going in partnership with China, even if it's while biting our lips.
Yeah. All right. China, 60% of the holdings here. EMQQ up big on the year, almost over 40% right now. Appreciate it for the walkthrough here. Really good stuff, Kevin, and looking forward to continuing this as this market has run. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Kevin Carter, EMQQ is the ETF.